Although it is one of the smallest countries in Europe, the Kingdom of the Netherlands played an important role in the history of the continent. At one time it was a great sea power and a trade rival of England on the oceans of the world. The Dutch established colonies on several continents. Today the Netherlands is no longer a great colonial power, but it still plays a significant role in European affairs, and its location makes it a major gateway to Europe for sea, land, and air traffic. The capital is Amsterdam. Area 13,143 square miles, 34,040 square kilometers. Population, 2020 est. 17,427,000. Land and climate. The Netherlands extends for 190 miles, 306 kilometers, north to south and for 160 miles, 257 kilometers, east to west. It is bordered on the east by Germany, on the south by Belgium, and on the west and north by the North Sea. The kingdom includes its former colonies in the Lesser Antilles: Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao, Saba, St. Eustatius, and St. Martin. Netherlands means low-lying country. More than one-fourth of the total area of the country actually lies below sea level. The land consists of the western corner of the Great North European Plain where a number of rivers enter the North Sea. Only in the extreme south are there hills. The West Frisian Islands, part of the Frisian Islands chain, are strung along the north coast. The Netherlands is divided into 12 provinces. The major ones historically are North and South Holland, hence the popular use of the name Holland to apply to the whole country. Over the centuries, the size of the land area has expanded considerably from the reclamation of land from the sea. At one time much of the land in the western part of the country lay underwater, including swamps and shallow lakes. In the Middle Ages the first attempts were made to drain the land by building a surrounding dike, or wall, and pumping the water out by means of windmills. Until the invention of steam and electric pumps, the windmill was the major tool for land reclamation. Such a reclaimed area is known as a polder. Today some 2,500 square miles, 6,500 square kilometers, of the Netherlands consist of reclaimed land. In 1920 a start was made on the reclamation of the large inland sea known as the Zuiderzee. Between 1927 and 1932 a 19-mile, 30-kilometer, long dam was built across the mouth of the Zuiderzee, separating it into the outer Waddenzee, open to the North Sea, and the inner IJsselmeer, Lake IJssel. By the early 1980s 4 polders, with a total area of about 650 square miles, 1,700 square kilometers, had been created through a system of pumping stations, dikes, sluices, and locks. The much reduced IJsselmeer has gradually become fresh water. Along the west coast there are a number of arms of the North Sea that penetrate inland. To prevent flooding by high tides, a series of dams was built across the mouths of the inlets. These dams can be opened and closed according to the level of the water. This Delta project was completed in 1986. If the Netherlands were to lose the protection of its dikes and the row of large sand dunes along the coast, the most densely populated part of the country would be inundated, largely by the sea but also in part by the rivers. This highly developed part of the Netherlands, which generally does not lie higher than about 3 feet, 1 meter, above sea level, covers more than half the total area of the country. The areas of the country originally underwater have in general clay soils, good for the growing of grain and other crops. In some areas in the west and north of the country there are peat deposits that resulted from the decomposition of vegetation in former swamps, known as fens. In the past this peat was used as fuel. Its removal resulted in a number of shallow lakes, some of which were drained, but others have been left as recreational areas. Along the rivers there are clay soils that are not as fertile as the sea clays. They are often used for grazing or fruit growing. In the eastern and southern parts of the country that lie above sea level, soils are generally poor. They consist mainly of sand and gravel that in places form ridges of low hills, reaching more than 330 feet, 100 meters, in height. The small jut of land in the extreme southeastern corner of the Netherlands, which extends southward between Belgium and Germany, is a region of chalk hills that reach 1,053 feet, 321 meters, at the Valzerberg, the highest point in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is crossed by 2 major rivers, the Maas and the Rhine. The Maas rises in France, where it is called the Meuse, and flows through Belgium to enter the Netherlands at its most southerly point. It flows northward and then westward to enter the North Sea. The Rhine enters the country from Germany and flows westward to the sea. It first divides into two branches, the Waal and the Rhine, and then the latter divides into the Rhine and the IJssel, which flows northward to the IJsselmeer. The western part of the Rhine is called the Lek. The Lek, Waal, and Maas flow parallel to one another and are connected by side streams and canals. The Netherlands has a typical maritime climate, with predominantly southerly and westerly winds. Winters are generally mild and summers cool from the influence of the sea. On average, frost occurs 60 days per year. July temperatures average about 63 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees Celsius, and those of January average 35 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius. Annual rainfall averages about 31 inches, 790 millimeters, with only about 25 clear days per year. The average rainfall is highest in summer, August, and autumn and lowest in springtime. The country is known for its heavy clouds, and on an average day 3/5 of the sky is clouded. Natural resources and plants and animals. At present about a third of the land area is used for farming, and only a small portion of the land is in its natural state with forests, heathlands, fens, and sand dunes. Most of the heathlands are found in the sandy regions of the east and south and are covered with heather, low bushes of gorse, broom and juniper, and other heath plants. Most of the forested areas also occur on sandy soils. They occupy about 11% of the total land area. Most are planted forests of coniferous trees, such as pine and spruce, which have commercial value. Most timber requirements are imported. Animal life is similar to that of most Western European countries. A large variety of sea and land birds is found. Larger mammals, such as roe deer, red deer, foxes, and badgers, are mostly restricted to nature reserves. Some species, such as boars, beavers, and muskrats, have been introduced locally or reintroduced. Some reptiles and amphibians are endangered. Resources for industry are largely lacking, but the few that exist are significant. Coal mining, concentrated in the southeast, was discontinued in 1974 because of the rising cost of production. The Netherlands imports several million tons of coal annually to meet domestic and industrial needs. In 1959, the energy situation changed completely with the discovery of large fields of natural gas in the northeast and beneath the Dutch sector of the North Sea. Technological advances led to an increase in offshore production in the last decades of the 20th century. 1/3 of the natural gas produced is exported, primarily to countries of the European Union, EU. Some small deposits of petroleum exist, but production is small, and the Netherlands must import most of its requirements. Among the country's other resources are zinc, sodium, and magnesium. People and culture. The inhabitants of the Netherlands number almost 16.5 million. Their language is Dutch, which is also called Netherlandic. Dutch is almost identical to Belgium's Flemish language, and it shares certain characteristics with both German and English. In the northern province of Friesland a language called Frisian is spoken, which has even closer links with English. When the area was originally settled by Germanic peoples, the north and west were occupied by the Frisians, the east by the Saxons, and the south by the Franks. The Dutch language developed mainly from the dialect of the Franks. Differences between the groups can still be noted in local dialects, customs, traditional folk costumes, and in types of farmhouses. Considerable numbers of foreigners have settled in the country. These include many who were persecuted for their religious beliefs or as political minorities, such as French Huguenots and Portuguese Jews, along with people who sought to improve their economic situation, such as Germans. In the 20th century, immigrants from the former Dutch overseas colonies added to the influx. They included Indonesians and peoples from the Moluccas and from Suriname on the northeastern coast of South America. At the beginning of the 21st century, however, an anti-immigrant movement emerged, along with stricter government regulations regarding immigration. The largest metropolitan areas are Amsterdam, the capital, and Rotterdam, the great seaport. The Hague, which is the seat of government, is somewhat smaller. Other major cities are Utrecht and Haarlem. The Netherlands is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, with about 1,267 inhabitants per square mile, 489 per square kilometer. At the beginning of the 21st century, Dutch birth and death rates were both among the world's lowest, resulting in a somewhat older society. About 30% of the Dutch people are Roman Catholics. They are the largest single religious group and are found mainly in the southern provinces of North Brabant and Limburg. The total number of Protestants is about 20%. Most of them belong to the Dutch Reformed Church. They live mainly in the north and west. Muslims now make up almost 6% of the population. Roughly 4 people in 10 follow no organized religion. The Dutch have made great contributions to European culture. In particular, the Dutch dominated European art in the 16th and 17th centuries. Some of the earlier painters were Dutch-speaking but lived in what is now northern Belgium. The most famous Dutch painter of the early period was Hieronymus Bosch, whose work was based on fantastic themes. In the late 16th century, painters concentrated on portraits, still lifes, and landscapes. Frans Hals was best known for his portraits and humorous scenes. He was followed by Rembrandt van Rijn, without doubt the greatest of the Dutch painters. His portraits and groups were commissioned by the rich middle class that was produced by the success of Dutch trade. Rembrandt also painted themes from the Bible. Johannes Vermeer, on the other hand, painted people engaged in the various activities of daily life. Willem van de Velde, Ferdinand Bol, Paulus Potter, Jacob van Ruisdael, Jan Steen, and Meindert Habema also painted during the 17th century. In the 19th century there was a revival of Dutch art with such artists as Joseph Israels, the three Maris brothers, and Anton Mauve. Vincent van Gogh went to France, where he painted under the influence of the French Impressionists. The De Stijl group of Dutch artists in the early 20th century was headed by Piet Mondrian. Willem de Kooning was born in Rotterdam, though he went to New York City in 1926. Dutch architecture is notable. Church architecture flourished in the Middle Ages, and several churches date from this period. In the 17th century Dutch architects designed palaces and country and town houses. One of the major features is the use of large ornamental gables. Later periods in Dutch architecture were more influenced by foreign styles. Dutch literature has had some international recognition. Tales of chivalry, religious stories, and plays were popular in the Middle Ages. In the 16th century the influence of the Renaissance led to writing on philosophical and humanistic themes. The greatest of these writers was Desiderius Erasmus. Later writers were Peter Cornelis Zoon Hooft, Gerbrand Bredero, Constantin Huygens, and Joost van den Vondel, all of whom wrote in the 17th century. Poet and dramatist van den Vondel produced some of the greatest works of Dutch literature. By the end of the 17th century, Dutch literature had gone into decline and was strongly under French influence. The only figure of significance in this period was Justus van Effen, who published a literary journal. At the end of the 18th century two woman writers, Betje Wolff and Aagje Dekken, wrote novels together with great success. Literature in the 19th century also had a revival. Jacob van Lennep wrote historical novels, Nicolaas Beets produced humorous sketches of Dutch life, while Eduard Deus Dekker, writing under the pseudonym Multatuli, described and criticized the life and administration of the Dutch East Indies. Writers who belong to the modern period of Dutch writing include Louis Couperus, Herman Heijmans, Henriette Roland Horst van der Schalk, Arthur van Schendel, Top Naef, and Jo van Amerskuller. Most wrote during the period before World War II. After the war Dutch literature followed the trends of European literature in general and became more diverse in nature. Simon Vestdijk was the major writer of the period. One of the most successful authors was Jan de Hartog, whose novels were translated into many languages. Among late 20th century writers, Jan Willem van de Wetering achieved international success with his crime novels. The Dutch have not produced many musical composers of note since Jan Pieterszoon Sweelinck in the 16th to 17th century but have one of the world's greatest orchestras, the Royal Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. Its conductors Willem Mengelberg, Eduard van Beinum, and Bernard Haitink achieved international reputations. Among Dutch singers soprano Ellie Ameling has a worldwide career. Apart from classical music, modern pop music is popular, and there are many pop groups and singers of all kinds who tend to copy their American or British counterparts. Like most Europeans, the Dutch are fervent followers of soccer, association football. Dutch teams play in international competition for the European and World Championships. Many Dutch are avid golfers, and there is some evidence that the game originated in the Netherlands. Field hockey is also a favorite sport with both men and women. Skating is popular, and Dutch speed skaters have been successful in international competition. The Elfstedentocht, a traditional race on ice skates around 11 cities in the province of Friesland, always arouses great interest but can be held only during winters with heavy ice. With its flat terrain and generally mild climate, the country is well suited for the use of the bicycle. Cycling is a sport, a form of recreation, and a method of transportation. Many people go to work or to school by bicycle. Cycle racing is popular, and Dutch teams compete in international events. Economy. For years many people thought of the Netherlands as a country of windmills, canals, tulips, and wooden shoes, with cheese and butter as its main products. This image of the Netherlands as a mainly agricultural country has not been true for a long time, as it is now as industrialized as most other Western European countries. Agriculture still provides a number of products, many of which are exported. The country's agricultural land is divided into grassland, arable farmland, and horticultural land. Dutch dairy farming is highly developed. The milk yield per acre of grassland and the yield per cow are among the highest in the world. A good percentage of the total milk production is exported after being processed into such dairy products as butter, cheese, Edam and Gouda cheese are known around the world, and condensed milk. Meat and eggs are produced in intensively farmed livestock holdings, where enormous numbers of pigs, calves, and poultry are kept in large sheds. Most cereals for human consumption as well as fodder for the animals are imported. Horticulture carried on under glass is of special importance. The export of hothouse tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, cut flowers, and houseplants has greatly increased. Open-air horticulture also produces fruit, vegetables, cut flowers, and bulbs, the latter from the world-famous colorful bulb fields. The Dutch fishing industry, while not large, is nevertheless significant. At the beginning of the 21st century, 3/4 of the fish consumed in the Netherlands was foreign caught, yet about 4/5 of the total catch was exported. As a result, the country is unusual in exporting more fish than it imports. Industrialization began later in the Netherlands than in most other Western European countries because of the scarcity of raw materials. The development of coal mining in the province of Limburg led to the establishment of a chemicals and gas industry there. The coal was used in an iron and steel industry, which was established on the coast at IJmuiden. Now this plant operates only on imported coal and iron ore. The production of crude oil, of which there are minimal deposits, covers only a small part of Dutch requirements. Large amounts are imported for refining in the Netherlands, and much of the refined petroleum is exported. The discovery of natural gas in 1959 had a tremendous influence on the development of the Dutch economy. One of the results of the reliance on gas, however, is that nuclear power is very limited in the Netherlands. On the other hand, the flat maritime landscape is well suited to the use of wind turbines, which are increasingly employed in agricultural areas. Manufacturing industries accounted for about 1/5 of the labor force in the early 21st century. The food and beverage, metal, chemical, petroleum, and electrical and electronics industries are all important. Textile manufacturing, shipbuilding, and aircraft construction were important historically, but employment in those sectors has greatly declined. The government has encouraged new industrial development in the fields of microelectronics, biotechnology, and the so-called digital economy. The service industry accounted for about 7/10 of the labor force, with tourism playing a vital role. The Netherlands is also a center of international finance and trade. In 1948, the Netherlands formed a customs union with Belgium and Luxembourg known as Benelux. It abolished all customs duties on goods moving between the three countries. The Benelux Union formed the basis on which the European Economic Community, which later became the European Union, was founded. Transportation, communication, and education. A comprehensive road network dominates both passenger and goods transport, despite the fact that there is a dense modern railway network. Dutch shipping companies handle about 2/5 of the European Union's freight transport by water. The Netherlands' network of inland waterways, made up of some 3,000 miles, 4,800 kilometers, of rivers and canals, is linked with Belgian, French, and German systems. Rotterdam has the country's best-equipped modern harbor, the largest on the continent. Europort, the region between Rotterdam and the North Sea, can easily be reached by the biggest ocean-going ships. For some 40 years, until busier Asian ports eclipsed it in the early 21st century, Rotterdam handled more tonnage than any other harbor in the world. Other important ports are Amsterdam and, on the western Scheldt, Flushing and Terneuzen. Amsterdam Airport Schiphol is among Europe's largest airports. The telecommunication system in the Netherlands is highly advanced, with extensive fiber optic and mobile networks. Cell phone usage in the Netherlands is comparable to that of most Western European countries, although personal computer use is high by Western European standards. All primary, secondary, and higher education is provided by either governmental or private institutions, the latter of which are mostly run by Protestant and Roman Catholic organizations. A number of the major universities cover a general range of disciplines, while others are more specialized, encompassing areas such as technology or agriculture. In addition, the Open University, established in 1984, provides for both university and vocational education through correspondence courses. Government. The Kingdom of the Netherlands is a constitutional monarchy. The present monarch is King Willem-Alexander, who ascended the throne in 2013 after his mother, Queen Beatrix, abdicated. The parliament, known as the States General, consists of two chambers. The first chamber is made up of members elected by the assemblies of the 12 provinces. Members of the second chamber are chosen by the electorate. The main political parties in the early 21st century included the Christian Democratic Appeal, CDA, the Labour Party, PVDA, the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, VVD, the Socialist Party, and Democrats 66. Trial by jury is unknown in the Netherlands. Professional judges administer justice, and arbitration plays a significant role. All judges are appointed for life by the sovereign. The judiciary includes a Supreme Court and courts of appeal. History. During the Middle Ages, the Low Countries, comprising the three countries now known as Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, were divided into small states, duchies, and counties. Each was separately ruled, and each was constantly at war with its neighbors. The powerful Burgundian Duke Philip the Bold finally got control of them, and between 1385 and 1433 he and his successors consolidated the states into a strong unit. When Charles the Bold of Burgundy was killed in 1477, the dukedom was inherited by his daughter, Mary. She married Maximilian I of Austria, a member of the House of Habsburg, and for many years thereafter the Habsburgs controlled the Low Countries. In 1556, when the Habsburg Emperor Charles V abdicated, Philip II of Spain became ruler of the kingdom that included the Netherlands. The Protestant Reformation had gained many adherents in the Low Countries, and the king, who was Roman Catholic, was determined to rout them. He sent the Duke of Alba with an army to crush the reformists. Many fled to Germany and England to escape torture and death. In 1568, the rebels won help from William the Silent, Prince of Orange, who was German-born but had estates in the Netherlands. His fleet captured the cities at the mouths of the Maas and Scheldt rivers and drove the Spaniards out of that region. The Protestant states formed the Union of Utrecht in 1579 and declared themselves independent in 1581. William became the first hereditary stadtholder of the United Provinces, or Dutch Netherlands. In 1579 the provinces in the south formed the Union of Arras, by which they allied with Spain and remained Catholic. Led by the statesman Jan van Oldenbarnevelt and by William's sons, the United Provinces forced Spain to sign a truce that virtually recognized their independence in 1609. Formal recognition was delayed until the Treaty of Munster in 1648. In the first half of the 17th century, the United Provinces grew in wealth and power. They possessed the largest merchant fleet in the world, and they started to acquire the colonies that ultimately made them a world power. The stadtholdership of the House of Orange was suspended between 1650 and 1672. In 1653 the anti-Orangists made Johan de Witt, one of their greatest statesmen, the political ruler of Holland. His first task was to fight the English, who had begun to realize that they had a serious rival on the sea. Anglo-Dutch warfare was spread over three periods, 1652–54, 1665–67, and 1672–74. In the first period memorable engagements were fought between the Dutch Admiral Martin H. Tromp, aided by one of his commanders, Michiel A. de Ruyter, and the English Admiral Robert Blake. In 1667 Admiral de Ruyter raided the Medway River in England, burned English vessels, and carried off the flagship to Holland. King Louis XIV of France invaded the Netherlands in 1672. The British, then his allies, attacked by sea. In this desperate situation, the Dutch recalled young Prince William III of Orange. A born strategist and devoted patriot, he compelled the French to withdraw in 1674. Under de Ruyter, the Dutch fleet had maintained its supremacy over the English, and in 1674 the English too made peace, but naval war with France continued. The Dutch fleet was ultimately defeated in the Mediterranean, and de Ruyter lost his life in 1676. Anglo-Dutch relations meanwhile improved. The rivalry ended in 1678 with the signing of a defensive alliance between the two countries. William III had married Mary, daughter of King James II of England. In 1689 he became the King of England when James was dethroned. In 1747 the office of stadtholder was restored to the House of Orange. In 1795 the Dutch people, dissatisfied with their ruler, William V, helped the invading French revolutionary armies. The French overthrew the House of Orange and made the country a republic. When Napoleon became emperor, however, he made the Low Countries part of his empire. After Napoleon's defeat, the Congress of Vienna reinstated the House of Orange and tried to make one nation of the northern and southern Low Countries. This new nation was named the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Prince of Orange was crowned King William I in 1815. 15 years later the southern provinces rebelled and set up the new Kingdom of Belgium. The people of the Netherlands obtained many rights of self-government from Kings William II and III of Orange. As a result, the Netherlands became a true constitutional monarchy. William III ruled from 1849 to 1890 and was succeeded by his daughter, Wilhelmina. She abdicated in 1948 in favor of her daughter, Juliana. Juliana and her husband, German Prince Bernhard of Lippe-Biesterfeld, had 4 daughters. The eldest, Beatrix, became queen when Juliana abdicated in 1980. After serving as queen for 33 years, Beatrix abdicated in favor of her eldest son, Willem Alexander, in 2013. During World War I, the Dutch succeeded in remaining neutral. But on May 10, 1940, during World War II, the Germans bombed many cities without warning. The Nazi Fifth Column paralyzed resistance, and the Netherlands surrendered in 5 days. The royal family and the cabinet escaped and set up a government in London. The Nazis all but starved the people and deported many to labor camps in Germany. Among those deported were thousands of Jews, many of whom had fled to the Netherlands from Germany during the 1930s as the Nazi Party rose to power. Most were sent to Westerbork, a small transit camp located near the village of Westerbork where Jewish inmates performed forced labor before shipment east to other concentration camps. The Nazis transferred about 100,000 Jews from Westerbork to Auschwitz beginning on July 15, 1942. Anne Frank and her family were imprisoned at Westerbork between their arrest in August 1944 and their transfer to Auschwitz the following month. The Dutch underground stubbornly resisted the Nazi invaders with sabotage and reprisals. Some vessels of the Dutch Navy escaped and helped patrol the Allied supply lines. In 1942, Japan seized the Dutch East Indies. The liberation of the Netherlands began in September 1944, when the Allies drove the Nazis from the southern borders. Nazi forces held the Lower Rhine until May 4, 1945, cutting dikes to slow the Allied advance. After the war, the Dutch quickly restored their battered cities and flooded lands, but they lost control of their East Indies Empire in Indonesian revolts from 1945 to 1948. In 1949, the Netherlands recognized the Dutch East Indies as independent. It became the Republic of Indonesia in 1950. In 1954, the Netherlands granted self-government to Suriname, formerly Dutch Guyana, and to the Netherlands Antilles, which in 2010 ceased to exist as a political entity as its constituent units achieved various degrees of independence within the Dutch kingdom. In 1962, the Netherlands surrendered Western New Guinea, the last of its East Indies holdings. Suriname finally became an independent republic in November 1975. The Netherlands is one of the original members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and belongs to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. It plays host to a number of international organizations, especially in the legal sector, such as the International Court of Justice. In the later 20th century, the Netherlands had gained a reputation for liberal social policies, such as the toleration of prostitution and of the limited use and sale of marijuana and hashish. In addition, same-sex marriages and euthanasia were legalized. This tolerance was tested in the early 21st century, however, when an increase in immigration from non-European Union countries and a populist turn in politics resulted in growing nationalism, marked by 2 race-related political assassinations. You can subscribe to support our channel and turn on the notification bell to be notified of new videos.